The moment you lose your job in 2026, the financial system stops treating you like a person and starts treating you like a liability. And most people have no idea how fast that shift happens. Here's what nobody really prepares you for. It's not the missing paycheck. You can see that coming. You can do the math. 30 days of expenses, 60, maybe 90 if you've been careful. That's manageable in theory. What actually changes is invisible, and it happens faster than people expect. Think about the last time someone asked you what you do for work. Now think about how many financial decisions in your life are quietly tied to that answer. Your credit, your insurance, your ability to rent, to borrow, to be taken seriously by a bank, all of it. Sitting on top of that one fact, employed. And the second that fact changes, something else changes too. Something that has nothing to do with your actual ability to manage money. The system recalibrates around you, not dramatically, quietly. And here's what makes 2026 different from any other year this could have happened to you. The economy isn't just slow right now, it's restructuring. Entire categories of work are compressing. Companies aren't just laying people off because they're struggling. Some of them are doing it because they figured out they don't need those roles anymore. Not temporarily, permanently. That changes the math on everything. The timeline for finding comparable work, the negotiating position you're in, the kind of income you might be walking back into, even when things do pick up. Most people losing their jobs right now are treating it like a pause, like they press pause on their financial life and they'll just press play again soon. But some of them, and this is the part that matters, some of them are sitting inside a full stop. And the difference between those two people isn't always obvious from the outside. Sometimes it isn't obvious to them either, not yet. That's what this is about. There's a specific feeling that hits around day 4 or 5 of unemployment, not day 1. Day 1, you're still in problem-solving mode. You're updating your resume, reaching out to people, telling yourself this is actually an opportunity. That energy is real. It's just not honest yet. Day 4 or 5, something quieter shows up. You open your banking app. Not because you need to. You were just there yesterday. You open it again anyway. And you look at the same number you looked at yesterday, and something in your brain starts doing a calculation you didn't ask it to do. How many weeks is that? How many months? What gets cut first? That's not panic. It's something more subtle than panic. It's your brain starting to shift from abundance thinking to scarcity thinking. And once that shift happens, it affects every decision you make, every single one, in ways you won't even notice at the time. Here's the psychology underneath that. When people feel financially secure, they make long-term decisions. They think in months, sometimes years. They evaluate options. They wait for better opportunities. They negotiate. They're patient. The moment real financial uncertainty enters the picture, and I mean real, felt in the body uncertainty, the time horizon collapses. Suddenly, everything is about right now. The first job offer starts looking better than it should. The first solution feels more urgent than it is. You start trading long-term position for short-term relief, and you tell yourself it's practical, it's just being realistic. But sometimes it isn't realistic. Sometimes it's just fear making decisions and calling itself logic. And here's the thing that most financial content won't tell you. This isn't a weakness, this is neuroscience. Your brain under resource scarcity genuinely functions differently. Studies out of Harvard and Princeton showed that financial stress doesn't just feel bad, it measurably reduces cognitive bandwidth. The mental load of worrying about money actually impairs decision-making in real time. Not because you're not smart, because you're human, and your brain is spending energy on threat monitoring that used to go toward clear thinking. So you're being asked to make some of the most important financial decisions of your life, at exactly the moment when your brain is least equipped to make them. That's not a coincidence, that's just the situation, and knowing it doesn't make it go away. But it does change how you respond to it. Most people in this position start optimizing for the feeling of progress. Sending applications feels productive. Accepting a fast offer feels like relief. Cutting subscriptions feels like control. And some of that is useful, but a lot of it is just movement. And movement is not the same as direction. The people who come out of job loss in a stronger position than they went in, and they exist, they're not mythical. They're usually the ones who manage to slow down slightly. Not completely, not irresponsibly. Just enough to separate the real decisions from the reactive ones. Enough to notice when they were about to make a permanent choice in response to a temporary feeling. That gap. That small pause between the pressure and the decision. That's where everything important happens. Most people never find it, not because they're not trying, because nobody told them to look. Let's talk about what actually changes, practically, systemically, because there's a list of things that shift the moment your employment status changes, and most people only discover them one at a time, as they happen, which is the worst possible way to find out. The first one is credit, and not in the obvious way. Your credit score doesn't drop the day you lose your job. The bureaus don't know yet. Your score is still sitting there, looking fine, and that creates a window, a short one, where you still have access to things you might not have access to in 60 days. Most people don't know this window exists, so they don't use it. They wait until they need something, and by then the picture has changed. I'm not saying go borrow money you don't need. That's not the point. The point is that your financial options are widest right now, at the beginning, before the system has had time to update its picture of you, and that window closes quietly, no warning. Here's what actually happens to credit during extended unemployment. You don't miss payments on day one. You're careful, you're managing, but somewhere around month 2 or 3, if income hasn't returned, something slips. Maybe a small balance starts carrying. Maybe a payment comes in 3 days late because you were timing things carefully and miscalculated. Small things. Things that feel small. But credit systems aren't reading your situation. They're reading your behavior. And late is late. Partial is partial. The context doesn't get recorded. So by the time you actually need your credit to rent a new apartment, to buy a car to get to a new job, to access any kind of bridging, it's already softer than it was. And you're applying for things from a weaker position than you would have been 3 months earlier. That's the credit trap. And almost nobody talks about it because it feels too specific, too detailed. But it's real and it's common, and it happens on a very predictable timeline. The second thing that changes, and this one surprises people, is insurance. Most people in employment get health coverage, life coverage, sometimes disability coverage through their employer. And they don't think about it much because it just works. It's in the background. When they lose the job, those policies either end or they get the option to continue them at full cost, which is usually 2 to 3 times what they were paying before, sometimes more, because the employer was covering a significant portion they never saw on their paycheck. So suddenly there's a decision. Pay for coverage that feels expensive when income has stopped, or let it lapse temporarily and hope nothing happens. Most people let it lapse. It feels rational in the moment. Nothing has gone wrong yet. The money is real, and the risk feels abstract. And then sometimes something happens. A medical bill, an accident, something that would have been manageable with coverage and becomes genuinely damaging without it. And now you're dealing with job loss and a financial shock at the same time, which is a completely different problem from either one alone. The third thing, and this is the one that hits people the hardest emotionally, is identity. This sounds like it belongs in a therapy conversation, not a finance one, but I'd push back on that. Because identity and financial decision-making are more connected than people realize. When you lose your job, you lose the social and financial structure that organized your week, your spending, your sense of trajectory. And without that structure, spending patterns change in ways that aren't always obvious. Some people go frugal in ways that hurt them, not buying things they genuinely need, delaying decisions that have real costs to delay. Others go the opposite direction and spend slightly more than usual as a way of maintaining the feeling of normalcy, of still being someone who can afford things. Neither of those is a moral failure. Both of them are just the brain trying to manage an uncomfortable reality through familiar behavior. But both of them cost money, and in different ways, both of them make the underlying situation harder to see clearly. And here's what ties all 3 of these together: credit, insurance, identity spending. They're all operating on timelines that don't feel urgent in week 1. They all have a quiet phase before the damage becomes visible, which means by the time most people notice any of them, they've already lost some ground they didn't realize they were losing. The job loss itself is the event, but it's what runs underneath the job loss in the weeks and months after that determines what you're actually dealing with. There's something specific about 2026 that makes all of this harder, and I want to be direct about it because I think a lot of financial content right now is dancing around it. The job market isn't just tight, it's structurally different from what it was even 3 years ago, and the people feeling that the most aren't the ones at the bottom of the income ladder, they're the ones in the middle. The ones who built careers in roles that felt stable, felt skilled, felt like the kind of work that doesn't disappear. Project managers, mid-level analysts, certain categories of marketing, operations, coordination work, Roles that required real humans because the complexity seemed too high to automate. That complexity ceiling moved, quietly and then quickly. And I'm not saying this to be bleak. I'm saying it because the standard advice, update your resume, network, stay positive, it'll come back. That advice was built for a different kind of job market, one where the work was still there, just temporarily inaccessible, where patience and persistence were enough. In some sectors right now, the work isn't temporarily inaccessible, it's been restructured out, and returning to the same income level in the same type of role on the same timeline that people are planning around, that's becoming a less reliable assumption than it used to be. Which means the financial runway people think they have might be based on a timeline that doesn't match the actual market they're about to navigate. That's not a comfortable thing to say, but it's more useful than comfortable. So what does that mean practically? It means the financial decisions you make in the first 60 days of unemployment carry more weight in 2026 than they would have in 2021 or 2019. Because the cushion between your current situation and a genuinely difficult one is thinner than the standard planning model assumes. Here's where the emotional peak of this actually lives. And I want to slow down here for a second. The people who are most at risk right now aren't the people with no savings. They're the people with some savings, enough to feel okay for a while, enough to delay the hard conversations, enough to keep the surface looking normal while something underneath is quietly shifting. Because when you have nothing, you act fast. You make moves. You get uncomfortable and you push through it because you have no choice. But when you have 3 months of runway, you wait. You stay comfortable a little longer than you should. You tell yourself you'll start making the harder decisions next month. You protect the feeling of stability, even as the actual stability underneath it is being quietly used up. And then somewhere around month 2.5, you look at the number again, and it's different now. And the job market still looks the same. And the offers you've been holding out on start looking better than they did. And now you're making decisions from a depleted position instead of a full one. That's the trap. Not the job loss itself, the false runway, the buffer that felt like safety, but was actually just delay. I've seen this happen to people who did everything right. Good savings, reasonable lifestyle, smart enough to know better, and they still fell into it. Because it's not about intelligence. It's about the psychological comfort that a number in a bank account provides. It feels like time, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just the feeling of time. And those two things behave very differently when the pressure actually arrives. The ones who navigate this well, and again, they exist, they treat the beginning of unemployment like the most expensive period, not the safest one. They make the hard calls early when they still have options. They don't wait until the runway is short to start thinking about extending it. They do that work while the number is still comfortable and the pressure is still low. Not because they're smarter, because they understood something about timing that most people only understand in retrospect. Early decisions made from strength, late decisions made from fear, same person, completely different outcomes. And the gap between those two paths, it usually opens up in the first 30 days. Before most people even believe they need to take it seriously. So here's where we land. And I want to say this plainly, without dressing it up. Losing your job in 2026 is not the same event it was 5 years ago. The market you're returning to is different. The timeline is less predictable. The structural changes underneath the economy are real, and they're not waiting for anyone to catch up. And the financial systems around you, credit, insurance, the invisible infrastructure of employed life, those don't pause while you figure things out. They keep moving. They keep recalibrating, with or without your awareness. That's the reality, not to frighten anyone. Just because it's true, and true is more useful than reassuring. But here's the other side of that, and this part matters just as much. The people who come out of this kind of disruption in a better position than they entered it, financially, professionally, in terms of how they think about money, they're not the ones who avoided the fear. They felt it too, all of it. The app opening at midnight, the calculations running in the background, the quiet dread of a Thursday afternoon with nowhere to be. What they did differently was refuse to let that fear make the decisions. They slowed down just enough. They separated the real from the reactive. They made the hard call early instead of the comfortable one late. And they treated the first 30 days not as recovery time, but as the most strategically important period of the entire experience. That reframe. That small shift in how you see the beginning of the thing, that's where the difference lives. And I want to add one more thing before this ends, because I think it's the most human part of all of this, and it almost never gets said. Losing your job changes how you see yourself, quietly, without asking permission. And that shift in self-perception feeds directly back into financial behavior in ways that are almost impossible to track in real time. You start making smaller decisions, safer ones. You negotiate less, you accept more. You shrink the picture slightly without realizing you've done it, and sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes the situation genuinely calls for smaller moves, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the situation calls for the same clarity and confidence you had 6 months ago, when you were employed, when the world felt more stable. And the only difference between then and now is a status update that the system knows about, but that doesn't actually change what you're capable of. That's worth holding on to, in the moments when it's hardest to. The financial mechanics matter. The credit window, the insurance gap, the runway math, the timeline assumptions, all of it matters, and all of it is worth understanding in detail. But underneath all of it, the real variable is how clearly you can think when the pressure is real and the options feel like they're narrowing. That clarity, that's the asset. And unlike savings, unlike a job title, unlike a credit score, that one doesn't show up on any statement. Nobody can take it from you. And it's available right now, regardless of what the bank account says. Most people will hear this and still miss it. They'll nod, feel something for a moment, and then go back to whatever they were doing before. Waiting, delaying, hoping the timeline works out. But a few will understand exactly what to do next. Not because this told them what to do, because something in here helped them see their own situation more clearly than they did 20 minutes ago. And that's enough. That's where real decisions come from. If that's you, if something here landed in a way that felt useful, stay close. There's more coming. Not motivation, not hype, just the kind of financial thinking that actually holds up when things get real. Subscribe if that's what you're here for. No pressure. You'll know if it's worth it.